Hi everyone. Here question is conversion of epsilon NFA to NFA using direct method. First try to understand what does direct method says. Let's assume that there are two states Qi and Qj and there is a epsilon transition between Qi to Qj. There are two rules in this method. The first rule says that if there is a epsilon transition between Qi to Qj and Qj is a final state, then Qi will also become the final state. Simple one. If epsilon transition between the two states and target state, here Qj is final, then Qi will also become final. Second rule says that let's suppose there are few more transitions from Qj like for A and for B, for the state Q1 and for state Q2. Second rule says that if suppose there is a epsilon transition between Qi to Qj, then all transitions starting from Qj, here there are two transitions for A and B, all transitions starting from Qj will also start from Qi. Which are the transitions starting from Qj? First of all, write it for better understanding. Qj having transition for A going to Q1, Qj having transition for B going to Q2. Then rule says that if there is a epsilon transition between Qi to Qj, then all transition, this and this one for A and B, all this transition will also start from Qi. Then just for understanding, I am removing this Qj here and I am writing here Qi as per the rule. Now these transitions were starting from the Qj, now it will also start from the Qi. Qi to Q1 for A, then I am adding this Qi to Q1, Qi to Q2 for B. Once you apply these two rules, then you can remove these epsilon transitions. These are the two rules that you need to apply to solve this question also. Let's try to understand once again this rule and apply here. Now here, always try to find the epsilon transition. If there are more transitions, then start from the last final state. Here final state is E, but there is no epsilon transition connected with E. Then identify the epsilon transitions. Here we have one transition A to B. Here we have one transition A to D. Then out of this you can choose any of the transition and try to apply these rules and remove it. So we are going to select one transition, but before that wherever is no change, for example here is no epsilon transition, so 1 2 3 4, these four transitions will be as it is. So let's redraw the same diagram and then we can discuss this how it can be removed. Then for example this B state as it is, C state as it is, we have D also and state E also. E is a final, so make it as a final. All transitions will be as it is, for example B to C and C to B. This is for 0 1, this is for 1 and this is for 0. A to B for epsilon, A to D for epsilon. All these transitions are as it is. Now if suppose I am targeting to remove A to B transition, so write it down here, A to B, this is the epsilon transition from A to B. Then the first rule, if suppose there is a epsilon transition from Qi to Qj and if Qj is final, then Qi becomes final. Here is a epsilon transition from A to B, B is final, check here, no, B is not final, then no need to apply the first rule as B is not final. Second rule, if there is a epsilon transition from Qi to Qj, then all transitions starting from Qj will also start from Qi like here. Then all transitions starting from B, so which are the transitions starting from B? For example B to C we have one transition for symbol 0, so B to C we have one transition for symbol 0. Then B to E we have one more transition for symbol 1, then we can write it as it is. This is for symbol 1. B to E we have one more transition for symbol 1. As there is a epsilon transition from A to B, then all transitions starting from B, here is a transition for 0, here is the transition for 1, will also start from A. Then for understanding I am just removing this B from here and just replace this B by A for better understanding. Then there will be A to C transition for 0, then I am writing this A to C for 0. Then there will be A to E transition for 1, then I am writing this A to E for 1. Make sure you are not removing the existing one. In addition to that, you have to add these transitions. And in this way, you have applied both the rules. If you apply both the rules, then you can remove this epsilon transition. So I am removing this. So no need of this epsilon transition now, as we have replaced these two transitions to remove the epsilon transition. Now there is one more epsilon transition here, A to D. You can apply the same rules here also. How to apply? Write it down separately, those two states. For example, here A to D. Which transition? Epsilon transition. Then first rule, if there is a epsilon transition from Qi to Qj, and if Qj is final, Qi becomes final. Here epsilon transition from A to D, is D is final? No. Then no need to apply the first rule. Second rule, if there is a epsilon transition from Qi to Qj, then all transitions, for example here A and B, all transitions starting from Qj will also start from Qi. Let's apply. Here is the epsilon transition from A to D. Then all transitions starting from D. First of all, write it down. Transition starting from D is D to E. For symbol 0. As there is a epsilon transition from A to D, then all transitions starting from D will also start from A. So this D will be replaced by A just for understanding. I am not replacing it in the diagram. Then you need to add A to E transition for 0. Then A to E transition for 0. Already we have one transition there for 1. You can use the same transition, just add here symbol 0. You have applied both the rules. Again, make sure that you are not removing the existing transition, you are just adding in addition to that. Once you apply both the rules, you can remove this epsilon transition. So I am removing it. And this becomes your almost final answer, epsilon NFA to NFA. But before this, there is one simple rule, or we can say automata consists of various states where A is a starting state, and from this starting state we can move to different state. For example, we can move A to C for symbol 0, then C to B, then B to E, similarly A to E. But this D is a state which is not in use. For example, there is a transition from D to E, but this transition will never get executed because there is no way to reach to D. From starting state, there is no any other path to reach to D. So this transition is useless and we can remove this. This will also becomes final answer, but we need to remove this non-reachable state. Concept of this non-reachable state we will be learning in the next few sessions. So how to you can redraw the same diagram, or you can remove this D state here itself. If I remove this, our diagram becomes like this. If you want in the exam, you can redraw this, but this is now final answer. This way you can convert epsilon NFA to NFA. Thank you for watching.